The signal came through at 0300 hours when most of the galaxy was sleeping. It was weak and broken but clear enough to understand. Colony 7 Alpha requesting immediate assistance. Unknown pathogen spreading rapidly. Population dropping. Food supplies contaminated. Please respond. Captain Elena Rodriguez was drinking her third cup of coffee in the cargo hold of the New Horizon when Lieutenant Jake Morrison called her to the communications deck. Jake was a young officer with steady hands and sharp eyes who never missed important signals. Elena trusted him more than her own instincts. Sometimes. Jake played the message again. The voice was human but desperate. Elena could hear fear in every word. She had been running cargo between Outer Rim colonies for 5 years and had never heard anything like this. The message repeated every 30 minutes exactly. Someone had set up an automated system and was hoping someone would hear. Elena asked Jake to trace the signal. His fingers moved fast over the controls. The source location made him stop. He looked at Elena with worry in his eyes. The signal was coming from Kepler 442b. Everyone in the cargo business knew that name. It was in the quarantine zone. No ships were supposed to go there. Elena called up the star charts. Kepler 442b sat at the edge of civilized space. The planet had been marked dangerous by every major species in the galaxy. The file said it had extreme weather patterns and hostile wildlife. The Galactic Council had declared it off limits 3 years ago. Any colony there was supposed to have been evacuated, but someone was still there. Someone was dying. Elena sent the signal to Galactic Command and waited for orders. While she waited, she studied everything she could find about Kepler 442b. The planet was what scientists called a death world. Gravity was stronger than Earth normal. The atmosphere had high oxygen levels that caused lightning storms. The native animals were big and hunted in packs. Most alien species considered it impossible to live there safely, but humans had lived in worse places. Elena had grown up on Mars before it was fully terraformed. She knew about hostile environments. The response from Galactic Command came back fast. Stay away from the quarantine zone. Do not approach Kepler 442b. Continue normal cargo runs. The message was signed by Admiral Hayes himself. Elena sat in her captain's chair and thought. Someone was dying out there. Someone was sending out a desperate call for help every 30 minutes. She checked the galactic communication networks. The signal was being received everywhere. Every major species had monitoring stations that would have picked it up, but no one was responding. Elena called up the Galactic Council records. The Zephyrians had voted to maintain quarantine. Their crystal bodies could be damaged by unknown diseases. The Chitauri refused to get involved. Their hive mind could be infected by biological agents. The energy-based lumens said the situation was not compatible with their existence. Every species had good reasons to stay away. Jake brought Elena more information. The colony on Kepler 442b was not just humans. Records showed it was a mixed settlement with 12 different species. About 4,000 beings had been living there when the quarantine started. The distress signal mentioned 3,000. 1,000 people had already died. Elena looked at her crew manifest. She had 12 people aboard the New Horizon. Dr. Lisa Carter was their medic. Pete Sullivan was the best engineer Elena had ever worked with. Security Chief Danny Brooks could handle any trouble. Pilot Amy Foster could fly through anything. The rest were good people who trusted Elena's judgment. Elena made her decision. She called the crew together in the main cargo bay. Everyone came quickly. They could tell from her voice that something important was happening. Elena played the distress signal. She showed them the location. She explained about the quarantine and the danger. She told them that every other species in the galaxy had decided not to help. Then she asked them a simple question. Should they go anyway? Dr. Carter spoke first. People were dying from disease. That was her job? She was going. Pete Sullivan said the colony probably had failing systems. They would need an engineer. He was going. Danny Brooks pointed out that Deathworlds had dangerous animals. Someone needed to keep people safe. He was going. Amy Foster said. Flying through storms was what she did best. She was going one by one. Every crew member volunteered. They all knew it might be a one-way trip. They all knew they were disobeying direct orders. They all knew the galaxy had declared the place too dangerous for rescue operations, but someone had to try. Elena sent a message to Galactic Command. She told them about her decision. She explained that she could not ignore people who needed help. She said she understood the consequences. Then she ordered Amy to set course for Kepler 442b. The New Horizon turned away from its planned cargo route and headed for the quarantine zone. Behind them, the normal galaxy continued its business. Cargo. Ships moved between safe planets. Passenger liners followed approved routes. Military vessels patrolled peaceful sectors. Ahead of them lay a world that had scared away every civilized species. A place where storms raged constantly and monsters hunted anything that moved. A place where people were dying while the galaxy looked the other way. Elena sat in her captain's chair and watched the stars. The journey would take 3 weeks. She hoped they would not be too late. She hoped her small crew could make a difference. Where the combined fleets of a dozen species had refused to try, the distress signal continued to repeat. Colony 7 Alpha requesting immediate assistance. Unknown pathogen spreading rapidly. Population dropping, food supplies contaminated. Please respond. This time someone was responding. The New Horizon and her crew of 12 humans were coming. They were coming because that was what humans did. When everyone else said it was too dangerous, they found a way. When everyone else said it was impossible, they tried anyway. They were Deathworlders heading to a death world to save people that the rest of the galaxy had written off as already dead. The messages started coming in 6 hours after the New Horizon changed course. Admiral Hayes sent 3 separate orders demanding Elena turn back immediately. The Galactic Council transmitted an official warning about violating quarantine protocols. Even the shipping company that owned her cargo sent angry messages about contract violations. Elena deleted them all without reading past the first line. Jake kept monitoring the distress signal from Colony 7 Alpha. The automated message was still repeating, but it was getting weaker. Either their power was failing or fewer people were left alive to maintain the transmitter. Jake tried to send a response but got no answer. The colony was too far away for two-way communication yet. Dr. Carter spent her time in the medical bay preparing for what they might find. She had no idea what kind of pathogen was killing the colonists. It could be a virus or bacteria or something completely unknown. She organized every medical supply they had and studied treatment protocols for diseases that affected different alien species. The problem was that most galactic medicine was designed for one species at a time. Human drugs could kill a Zephyrian. Chitauri treatments would poison a Lumen. A mixed colony with 12 species would need 12 different approaches to any disease. Carter had supplies for basic human medicine and some general alien treatments, but nothing specialized. Pete Sullivan worked on modifying their ship systems for the conditions on Kepler 442b. The high oxygen atmosphere would make their engines run too hot. The electrical storms would interfere with their sensors. The strong gravity would stress their landing gear beyond normal limits. Pete had to redesign their atmospheric processors and shield their electronics. He strengthened their hull plating and upgraded their power systems. The New Horizon was built for normal space conditions. Pete was turning it into a ship that could survive on a death world. Danny Brooks prepared for the wildlife. Galactic records described creatures on Kepler 442b that hunted in organized packs and could grow as large as Earth elephants. They were fast and smart and considered humans to be good food. Danny checked their weapons and planned defensive strategies for protecting the colonists. Amy Foster studied the storm patterns and atmospheric conditions. Flying on Kepler 442b would be like flying inside a constant thunderstorm. The electrical activity would blind their sensors, and the high winds would throw their ship around like a toy. Most alien pilots would consider landing there to be suicide, but Amy had learned to fly in the asteroid fields around Mars. She had navigated through solar storms and magnetic anomalies. She thought she could handle whatever Kepler 442b could throw at them. The rest of the crew helped where they could. Everyone understood they were heading into extreme danger. Everyone knew they might not come back. But no one complained or asked to be transferred to another ship. 3 days into the journey, Elena received a personal message from Admiral Hayes. He warned her that helping the colony would mean court-martial and prison time. He said her career was over and her crew would face the same punishment. He told her to reconsider while there was still time to turn back. Elena recorded a simple response. Someone has to try. Dick discovered something important while monitoring Galactic communications. The distress signal from Colony 7 Alpha was being received by monitoring stations across the galaxy. Every major species knew about the crisis. Military fleets were positioned near the quarantine zone, but none were moving to help. The Zephyrian Crystal Fleet had 12 ships within 2 days' travel of Kepler 442b. They stayed at their patrol stations. The Chitauri war swarms had enough vessels to evacuate the entire colony in hours. They remained in formation at the edge of the system. The Lumen Energy Collective could have sent aid instantly through their quantum networks. They chose not to interfere. Elena realized that the New Horizon might be the only ship in the galaxy actually heading toward the dying colony. Every advanced civilization with the power to help had decided the risk was too great. Only her small crew of humans was willing to try. On day 7, Pete finished the major ship modifications. The New Horizon now had reinforced hull armor and improved life support systems. Their engines could handle the high oxygen atmosphere, and their electronics were shielded against electrical interference. Pete had essentially rebuilt their ship in 1 week. Dr. Carter completed her medical preparations. She had organized treatment protocols for every known alien physiology and prepared isolation facilities in case the pathogen was highly contagious. She still did not know what they would face, but she was ready for anything. Danny Brooks ran combat drills with the crew. Everyone learned to use the ship's defensive weapons and personal protection gear. They practiced emergency procedures for wildlife encounters and hostile environment operations. Danny turned cargo handlers into a military unit in 7 days. Amy Foster programmed new flight patterns and approach vectors for the Kepler 442b landing. She studied every available scan of the planet's surface and identified potential landing sites near the colony. She prepared for the most dangerous flying mission of her career. On day 10, they received an unexpected transmission. Captain Ryan Murphy of the cargo ship Iron Will had heard Elena's original message to Galactic Command. He was also heading toward Kepler 442b with his crew of 15 humans. Murphy said he could not let Elena's people face the danger alone. 2 days later, Captain Sophie Watson joined them. Her medical transport Mercy's Edge carried advanced hospital equipment and a full surgical team. Sophie had convinced her crew to violate their orders and help with the rescue mission. By day 15, 3 human ships were traveling together toward the quarantine zone. Elena realized that word was spreading through the human fleet network. Other captains were hearing about the mission and deciding to help despite the official orders to stay away. The messages from Galactic Command became more threatening. Admiral Hayes promised severe punishment for anyone who entered the quarantine zone. The Galactic Council issued formal warnings about contamination protocols. Several alien governments demanded that humans be banned from the sector entirely. Elena ignored them all. Jake kept monitoring the distress signal, which was now very weak. Dr. Carter finished her final preparations. Pete ran system checks on all their modifications. Danny organized the defensive equipment. Amy plotted their final approach to Kepler 442b. On day 18, they reached the edge of the Kepler 442b system. Long-range sensors showed massive storm activity covering the entire planet. Electrical discharges were so intense they were visible from space. The colony's signal was barely detectable through the interference. Elena gathered her crew one final time. She reminded them that they could still turn back. No one would blame them for deciding the risk was too great. The entire galaxy had made that choice, but Elena's crew was not the galaxy. They were humans from Earth. They came from a world that had tried to kill them in 1,000 different ways. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters. They did not turn back when people needed help. Elena gave the order to enter orbit around Kepler 442. Amy guided the New Horizon through the outer storm layers toward the planet's surface. Behind them, the Iron Will and Mercy's Edge followed. 3. Human ships heading into the storm, while the rest of the galaxy watched from a safe distance. The real test was about to begin. The storms around Kepler 442b were worse than anything in the databases. Lightning struck constantly across the upper atmosphere, creating a web of electrical energy that stretched from pole to pole. Amy Foster had to fly the New Horizon through gaps between the lightning strikes while fighting winds that tried to tear their ship apart. Elena watched the readings on her command screen. The electrical interference was so strong that their sensors could barely function. Communication with the colony was impossible until they got much closer to the surface. They were flying blind through one of the most dangerous atmospheric conditions in known space. No wonder every other species had refused to attempt a rescue. Amy brought them down through 3 layers of storm clouds. Each layer had different wind patterns and electrical activity. The ship shook and rolled as she fought to maintain control. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as systems struggled with the electromagnetic interference. Pete Sullivan worked frantically to keep their modified electronics functioning. The electrical storms were stronger than he had calculated. Their shielding was holding but barely. He rerouted power through backup systems and manually controlled critical functions that the computers could no longer handle. Jake Morrison finally got a signal through to the colony when they dropped below the lowest storm layer. The response was immediate and desperate. Colony 7 Alpha was still alive but in terrible condition. Their power was failing and more people were dying every hour. Dr. Ben Taylor was the colony's lead medical officer. He gave Elena a quick report over the crackling communication link. The unknown pathogen had killed over 1,000 people in the past 3 weeks. It affected every species differently, but all were dying. Their medical supplies were nearly gone, and their isolation facilities had failed days ago. Elena asked for landing coordinates. Ben Taylor gave her the location of their main landing pad, but warned that the area was not safe. The electrical storms had driven the native wildlife crazy. Hunting packs were roaming close to the colony perimeter and attacking anything that moved. Amy Foster brought the New Horizon down through the final approach. The landing pad was surrounded by damaged buildings and debris from the storm. Elena could see movement in the shadows that might have been animals or might have been desperate colonists. Everything looked wrong and dangerous. The ship touched down with a crash that rattled every bolt in the hull. Amy had done the impossible by getting them through the storms, but the landing was rough. Pete immediately began damage assessments, while Danny Brooks prepared the security team for immediate deployment. Elena looked out at the colony through the bridge windows. The settlement had been built to house 4,000 people from 12 different species. Now it looked like a disaster zone. Buildings were damaged by lightning strikes and high winds. Power lines were down everywhere. Emergency lights flickered weakly in the constant twilight under the storm clouds, but people were moving toward their ship. Elena could see humans and aliens running across the landing pad despite the danger. They had heard the ship land and were coming to meet their rescuers. Dr. Carter grabbed her medical kit and headed for the airlock. Elena and Danny Brooks went with her. They needed to make contact with the colony leadership and assess the situation quickly. Every minute they stayed on the surface increased their danger from both the pathogen and the wildlife. Ben Taylor met them at the airlock. He was a tall, thin man with tired eyes and hands that shook from exhaustion. Behind him came Dr. Sarah Kim, who worked with alien physiology, and Dr. Alex Rodriguez, who specialized in infectious diseases. All 3 looked like they had not slept in days. Ben Taylor led them toward the main medical facility while Danny Brooks and his security team established a defensive perimeter around the New Horizon. Elena could hear strange sounds in the distance. That might have been wind or might have been something hunting. The electrical storms made it impossible to use most of their scanning equipment. The medical facility was worse than Elena had expected. Hundreds of sick people lay on every available surface. Humans were mixed with Zephyrians and Chitauri and species Elena could not identify. All were in various stages of the same disease but showing different symptoms. Dr. Carter immediately began examining patients while asking questions about the pathogen. Ben Taylor explained that the disease seemed to be caused by a native microorganism that had been disturbed by mining operations. It had started spreading 3 weeks ago and was killing about 50 people per day. The worst part was that it affected each species differently. Humans developed severe respiratory problems. Zephyrians had their crystal structures disrupted. Chitauri lost coordination between their individual components. Other species had different reactions, but all were fatal. If untreated, Dr. Sarah Kim showed Elena the colony's research data. They had identified the pathogen as a previously unknown organism that lived deep underground. The mining operations had brought it to the surface, where it found new hosts in the colony population. It was unlike anything in the galactic medical databases. Elena asked about the colony's leadership structure. Ben Taylor explained that most of the senior staff had died in the first week of the outbreak. The remaining department heads were trying to maintain basic services, but power failures and equipment breakdowns were making everything worse. Dr. Alex Rodriguez took Elena to see their power generation facility. The main reactor was functioning, but barely. Lightning strikes had damaged the distribution network and backup systems were failing one by one. Without power, their life support systems would collapse and everyone would die within hours. Pete Sullivan arrived with his engineering team to assess the power problems. He immediately saw that the colony's systems were not designed for the electrical interference from the storms. Their equipment was built for normal planetary conditions and could not handle the constant electromagnetic pulses. Elena realized that fixing the colony would require much more than treating the sick. They needed to repair the power grid and protect against the storms and deal with the dangerous wildlife. It was a complete disaster recovery operation on one of the most hostile worlds in the galaxy. Danny Brooks reported over the radio that his security teams had detected large animals moving near the colony perimeter. The electromagnetic storms had disrupted the animals' natural navigation systems and they were behaving aggressively. Several packs were approaching the settlement and would reach the outer buildings within hours. Elena made quick decisions. Dr. Carter would focus on treating the sick and developing treatments for the pathogen. Pete Sullivan would work on restoring full power and storm protection. Danny Brooks would organize defenses against the wildlife. Elena herself would coordinate overall operations and maintain contact with the other human ships. Jake Morrison established communication with Captain Murphy on the Iron Will and Captain Watson on the Mercy's Edge. Both ships were fighting their way through the storms and would land within the next few hours. Murphy had additional engineering supplies and Watson carried a full surgical hospital. As Elena organized the rescue operations, she realized why no other species had attempted this mission. The combination of hostile environment and dangerous disease and failing infrastructure would overwhelm most rescue teams. Even her 3 human ships might not be enough, but they were going to try. They had come too far and found too many people still alive to give up now. The colony had survived 3 weeks of hell. Elena's people would find a way to save them outside the medical facility. The storms continued to rage. Lightning split the sky every few seconds and the wind howled through the damaged buildings. Somewhere in the darkness, dangerous animals were hunting. The pathogen continued killing people every hour. Elena looked at the organized chaos around her and felt something she had not expected. She felt hope. Her people were already making a difference. The sick were getting better care. The power systems were being repaired. The defenses were being organized. Humans had come to a place that had scared away the entire galaxy. They were not just surviving, but starting to win. Dr. Carter made her breakthrough on the second day. She had been working around the clock with the colony's medical team when she noticed something important about how the pathogen affected humans compared to other species. Humans were getting sick, but they were not dying as fast as everyone else. The reason was simple but crucial. Humans came from Earth, which was classified as a death world. Their immune systems had evolved to handle aggressive pathogens and hostile microorganisms. The alien colonists had immune systems designed for safer worlds with less dangerous diseases, Carter realized. She could use human antibodies as the basis for treatments for all the other species. Human blood contained natural defenses that could be adapted to protect Zephyrians and Chitauri and all the others. It was a solution that could only work because humans were considered primitive and dangerous by galactic standards. She immediately began developing a treatment protocol using human plasma combined with existing alien medications. The first test. Subject was a dying Zephyrian whose crystal structure was breaking down from the infection. Within 6 hours of receiving the treatment, the crystal being was showing signs of recovery. Word spread quickly through the medical facility. Dr. Ben Taylor and his team began implementing Carter's protocol across all species in the colony. For the first time in 3 weeks, people were getting better instead of just dying slower. Meanwhile, Pete Sullivan was solving the power crisis with methods that violated every galactic engineering safety standard. The colony's power grid had been built according to strict alien safety protocols that assumed stable environmental conditions. But Kepler 442b was not stable, and the safety protocols were keeping the systems from functioning. Pete stripped out the safety limiters and overrode the automatic shutdown systems. He rerouted power through backup circuits and jury-rigged connections that would horrify any alien engineer. His modifications were dangerous and unstable, but they worked under the extreme conditions. Within 18 hours, Pete had restored full power to the colony. His engineering team worked with colonist volunteers to install additional shielding and create redundant systems. They used salvaged materials and improvised solutions that no alien species would have attempted. Danny Brooks was dealing with the wildlife problem using tactics that would have seemed insane to most galactic military forces. The native animals of Kepler 442b were pack hunters that used coordinated attacks to bring down large prey. Most alien species would have tried to avoid them or scare them away, but Danny was using human hunting strategies developed on Earth over thousands of years. He studied the animals' behavior patterns and identified their pack leaders. Then he organized mixed teams of humans and alien colonists to hunt the most aggressive packs before they could attack the settlement. The hunting expeditions were dangerous but effective. Danny's teams eliminated 3 major predator packs in the first 2 days and drove the others away from the colony perimeter. The colonists were amazed that anyone would deliberately hunt the creatures that had terrorized them for weeks. Amy Foster was making supply runs between the 3 human ships. Despite weather conditions that made flying nearly impossible, the electrical storms continued to rage across the planet, but Amy had learned to read the patterns and find safe corridors through the lightning. She transported medical supplies from the Mercy's Edge and engineering equipment from the Iron Will. Each flight was a death-defying journey through electromagnetic chaos, but Amy never lost a shipment or crashed a shuttle. Her flying skills were beyond anything most alien pilots could imagine. Captain Murphy and Captain Watson had landed their ships and were coordinating their crews with Elena's operations. Murphy's people specialized in heavy construction and industrial repair. Watson's medical team brought advanced surgical capabilities and specialized alien treatment equipment. Together, the 3 human crews were transforming the dying colony into a functioning settlement. The medical crisis was ending as Carter's treatments saved lives across all species. The power grid was stronger than it had been before the crisis. The wildlife threat was contained by aggressive hunting patrols. Elena coordinated everything. From a command post in the colony's main administration building, she maintained contact with all the work teams and made decisions that kept the complex operation running smoothly. Managing a disaster recovery mission on a death world required constant attention to 1,000 different problems, but Elena's people thrived in the chaos, where alien crews would have been overwhelmed by the multiple simultaneous crises. Humans seemed to get more focused and determined. They worked longer hours and took bigger risks and found solutions that no one else would have attempted. Dr. Carter's medical breakthrough led to additional discoveries about the pathogen. Working with Dr. Sarah Kim, she identified the specific environmental conditions that had made the microorganisms so aggressive. They developed long-term prevention protocols that would stop future outbreaks. Pete Sullivan's power grid improvements made the colony more resistant to storm damage. His engineering modifications could handle electromagnetic interference that would shut down standard alien systems. The settlement was becoming adapted to the hostile conditions of Kepler 442b. Danny Brooks trained mixed-species security teams to deal with the dangerous wildlife. His hunting tactics became standard operating procedures for anyone working outside the colony perimeter. The predators learned to avoid areas where humans were active. Amy Foster established regular flight schedules, despite the continuing storms. Her supply routes connected the colony to the human ships and enabled rapid transport of personnel and equipment. Flying on Kepler 442b was no longer impossible. On the fourth day, Elena received an unexpected communication from Galactic Command. Admiral Hayes was demanding immediate reports on the colony situation. The Galactic Council wanted to know why human ships were operating in the quarantine zone and what they had found there. Elena sent back detailed reports about the successful rescue operation. She described how her teams had stopped the pathogen outbreak and restored full colony operations. She explained that 3,000 lives had been saved through human intervention when no other species would help. The response from Galactic Command was immediate and angry. Elena was ordered to evacuate her people and abandon the colony immediately. The quarantine protocols were still in effect and human presence was unauthorized. Admiral Hayes threatened court-martial proceedings against all three ship captains. Elena deleted the message without replying. Her people were not leaving until the job was finished. The colony was functioning, but it needed permanent improvements to survive on Kepler 442b. They were going to complete the mission regardless of official orders. Jake Morrison reported that other human ships were requesting permission to join the rescue operation. Word had spread through the human fleet network about the successful mission. Captains were volunteering to bring additional supplies and personnel to help with the colony reconstruction. Elena realized that the rescue of Colony 7 Alpha was becoming something larger. Human crews throughout the galaxy were learning that they could succeed where other species failed. They were discovering that their Deathworlder heritage made them uniquely capable of handling extreme situations. By the end of the 5th day, the colony was not just saved, but stronger than before. The medical facilities had advanced treatments for hostile pathogens. The power grid could handle electromagnetic storms. The security systems could protect against dangerous wildlife. Most importantly, the colonists themselves had learned new ways to survive on their dangerous world. Humans and aliens worked together using techniques that combined human adaptability with alien knowledge. The settlement had become a model for how different species could cooperate in extreme environments. Elena stood on the observation deck of the administration building and watched her people working. Storm clouds still covered the sky and lightning still split the darkness, but the colony was thriving. Humans had come to a place that terrified the galaxy and made it safe for everyone. Captain Ryan Murphy's ship Iron Will brought the first wave of reinforcements on day 6. His cargo holds were filled with permanent weather monitoring equipment and construction materials for long-term colony improvements. Behind him came Captain Sophie Watson's medical vessel Mercy's Edge, carrying specialized hospital equipment and a full surgical staff, but they were not alone. 3 more human ships had followed them through the storms. Captain Lisa Chang brought industrial fabrication equipment aboard the cargo vessel New Dawn. Captain Kevin Torres carried advanced atmospheric processors on the transport ship Rising Star. Captain Maria Santos brought a full ecological survey team aboard the research vessel Deep Explorer. Elena watched from the colony's main landing pad as 6 human ships sat where no other vessels had dared to land. The galactic community had declared Kepler 442b too dangerous for rescue operations, but humans had turned it into a busy spaceport in less than a week. Dr. Carter's medical breakthrough had saved the colony, but the arrival of Captain Watson's surgical team transformed the medical facilities into something completely new. They established the first multi-species emergency treatment center designed specifically for hostile environment operations. The new medical protocols used human immune system adaptations as the foundation for treatments that could protect any species from aggressive pathogens. Dr. Ben Taylor worked with the human medical team to create treatment procedures that would revolutionize emergency medicine across the galaxy. Pete Sullivan coordinated with the engineering teams from all 6 ships to rebuild the colony's infrastructure. They installed storm-resistant power grids and electromagnetic shielding systems that could function during the worst weather conditions on Kepler 442b. The new power systems used design principles that combined human durability with alien efficiency. The modifications violated standard galactic safety protocols, but they worked perfectly under extreme conditions. The colony now had more reliable power than most settlements on safer worlds. Danny Brooks organized the security improvements with military precision. His teams established permanent wildlife monitoring stations around the colony perimeter and trained mixed species hunting parties to maintain population control of the dangerous native animals. The hunting protocols developed for Kepler 442b became the first standardized procedures for Deathworld wildlife management. Other colonies on dangerous planets requested copies of the techniques that humans had developed during the crisis. Amy Foster's flight operations expanded into a full transportation network connecting all areas of the colony to the human ships. She established landing schedules and flight paths that enabled safe travel despite the constant electrical storms. Flying on Kepler 442b was still dangerous, but Amy's procedures made it routine. Her transportation system allowed rapid deployment of personnel and equipment anywhere on the planet. The settlement was no longer isolated by the hostile environment. Captain Chang's fabrication equipment enabled local production of critical supplies and replacement parts. The colony could now manufacture everything needed for long-term survival without depending on supply shipments from the core worlds. Captain Torres's atmospheric processors improved the air quality in the colony's living areas and reduced the health risks from the high oxygen environment. His equipment made it possible for any species to live comfortably on Kepler-442b. Captain Santos's ecological team conducted the first comprehensive survey of the planet's native ecosystem. They identified the environmental factors that had triggered the pathogen outbreak and developed monitoring procedures to prevent future biological crises. On Day 8, Elena received formal communications from the Galactic Council demanding an immediate explanation for the unauthorized human presence in the quarantine zone. The Council had been monitoring the human rescue operation and was alarmed by the apparent success of the mission. Admiral Hayes sent increasingly angry messages, threatening severe punishment for all human personnel involved in the operation. The quarantine protocols had been established for good reasons, and human violations were unacceptable regardless of the outcomes. Elena finally responded with a comprehensive report detailing everything her people had accomplished. 3,000 lives saved from a pathogen that no other species could treat. Critical infrastructure rebuilt to handle extreme environmental conditions. Wildlife threats neutralized using innovative hunting strategies. A dying colony transformed into a thriving settlement. The Galactic Council's response was swift and contradictory. Elena received an official reprimand for violating quarantine protocols and endangering galactic security by exposing her crews to unknown biological agents. The reprimand was immediately followed by a commendation for saving 3,000 lives in a successful humanitarian rescue operation. Admiral Hayes transmitted Elena's court-martial orders at the same time he approved her promotion to commander and authorized formation of the first Human Emergency Response Division. The official messages were signed by the same people and sent within minutes of each other. Elena realized that the galactic leadership was struggling to understand what humans had accomplished. They wanted to punish the violation of safety protocols, while rewarding the successful rescue mission. They were afraid of human recklessness but impressed by human effectiveness. Dar Carter received requests from medical institutions across the galaxy for copies of her treatment protocols. The techniques she had developed during the crisis could save lives in emergency situations throughout civilized space. Human medical adaptations were suddenly valuable to everyone. Pete Sullivan's engineering modifications became the basis for new safety standards for equipment operating in extreme environments. His solutions to the power crisis had demonstrated that human engineering approaches could succeed where conventional methods failed. Danny Brooks was invited to address the Galactic Military Academy about Deathworld combat tactics. His wildlife management techniques had impressed alien military leaders who had never considered hunting as a legitimate security strategy. Amy Foster's flying procedures were incorporated into pilot training programs for emergency response operations. Her ability to navigate extreme weather conditions had shown that human pilots could operate in environments that grounded other species. Elena stood in the colony's rebuilt administration center and watched the activity outside. Mixed teams of humans and aliens worked together on construction projects that would have been impossible before the crisis. The settlement was not just surviving but growing. Colony 7 Alpha had become a symbol of interspecies cooperation and human emergency response capabilities. Representatives from various galactic governments were requesting permission to visit and study the techniques that had made the rescue possible. Elena's personal communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. She recognized the signal pattern immediately. Another distress call was being broadcast from somewhere in the quarantine zones. Another colony or ship or research station was in trouble in a place too dangerous for conventional rescue operations. Elena called her department heads together for an emergency briefing. Dr. Carter was establishing permanent medical facilities. Pete Sullivan was training alien engineers in extreme environment techniques. Danny Brooks was organizing the colony's new security forces. Amy Foster was expanding the transportation network. All of them looked up when Elena played the new distress signal. The message was coming from a research station in the Vega system where gravitational anomalies made normal space travel impossible. The station was losing life support and conventional rescue ships could not reach them. Elena asked the question that had started everything. Should they go? Dar Carter said there were probably sick people who needed medical attention. She was ready to go. Pete Sullivan said failing life support systems required an engineer who could work under impossible conditions. He was ready to go. Danny Brooks said dangerous situations needed security personnel who could adapt to any threat. He was ready to go. Amy Foster said flying through gravitational anomalies was just another navigation challenge. She was ready to go. Elena smiled and activated the colony's communication system. She sent a message to the research station in the Vega system. Help was coming. Humans were coming. The Deathworlders who had saved Colony 7 Alpha were on their way. She looked around at her people and realized that everything had changed. They were no longer just cargo haulers running supplies between safe worlds. They were the emergency response team that went places no one else would go. They were the ones who answered when everyone else said it was impossible. They were the species that turned quarantine zones into safe havens and transformed death worlds into homes. They were humans, and they did not abandon people who needed help. Elena gave the order to prepare for immediate departure. The New Horizon and her crew had work to do. Somewhere in the galaxy people were dying while civilized species calculated the risks and decided it was too dangerous to help, but humans would help. Humans would find a way. That was what Deathworlders did.